The candidates need no introduction. The Republican candidate, Vice President Richard M. Nixon, and the Democratic candidate, Senator John F. Kennedy.
Oh, that son of a bitch just cost us the election. Kennedy won on television, but Nixon won on radio. That's the myth. It's attained a certain level of truth in folklore. Is it true? Well, we'll discover there's a little more to it. The Kennedy and Nixon debates are historical for so many reasons. They were the first televised presidential debates. All of the debates were within weeks of the election itself. They came at a rapid clip, week by week. The first one was in Chicago on September the 26th, 1960. It was followed by one in Washington, D.C. on October the 7th, another on October the 13th, and the final one, again about just over a week later, October 21st. The third, interestingly, had Nixon in Los Angeles and Kennedy in New York. Maybe they were trying to do something like WrestleMania 2 did, following the first WrestleMania, I don't know. But the first one is the one that's remembered and talked about so much. The debates were staged at a time when there was a lot of change. Previously, radio had been the most important medium of communication in politics. But with the dawn of a new decade, the television was becoming increasingly more important.
This can be seen in the television adverts for the campaign. Although it wasn't the first campaign to use televised adverts, they were becoming more important because of the increase in television consumption. This is probably the most famous televised advert from the campaign. It's very stereotypical for the adverts used from the time, but maybe it was very effective. Although to me it sounds a bit ridiculous, the jingle stays in your head, and maybe that's the point. Let's just finish watching the rest of it.
There was huge interest in this debate. It was the first time that candidates had reached such a huge audience. It's estimated that they were reaching possibly about 100 million Americans. So it was completely new territory. In the weeks prior to the debate, Nixon injured his knee and it became infected. He was still getting over this at the time of the debate, and he had lost quite a lot of weight. The standard story goes, and it's somewhat true, that Nixon was used to debating, but he wasn't used to the television medium.
Now, this isn't entirely true, because Nixon had delivered one of the most famous pieces of political television up to that point, the Checkers speech. Nevertheless, that was still a fairly conventional speech, especially compared to the unconventional televised debate.
Kennedy, on the other hand, realized that this was a bit different from previous debates. He rested well, he prepared his image. One thing is for certain, all of the debates, but especially the first debate, really helped Kennedy. Immediately after the debate, his poll numbers went up, his popularity went up, and a general belief that he could win the election was much stronger after the first debate than it had been previously. Nixon, you have to remember, was the current vice president. He had been vice president for 8 years. He was very well known because of the pumpkin papers. And in general, a lot of people didn't really expect him to lose. A lot of people believe Nixon helped Kennedy just by agreeing to have a debate with him. Additionally, Nixon improved his performance for the second, third, and fourth debates, and his image was a lot better in those than it was in the first debate. Obviously indicating that he himself, and certainly his team, believed that his image wasn't that great in the first debate. Kennedy, previously suspected by many people to not really be qualified for the presidency, gained many new, influential, important supporters who watched the televised debate, whereas Nixon's supporters gave him quite a lot of criticism after watching it. It's claimed that Nixon's running mate, Henry Lodge, after watching the debate, declared that son of a bitch just cost us the election.
We must remain strong so that no nation will ever dare attack us. We must lead by our example, bringing about equality here at home.
One of the extreme ironies in this is that Lodge actually suggested that Nixon take the approach he did in this debate. Nixon was known for being, or often being, a very aggressive debater. So Lodge suggested being softer and more conciliatory. And Lodge himself didn't really think about the television angle either.
However, there isn't much polling from the time looking at the television and radio audience. One of the main reasons might simply be that it hadn't occurred to many people that there might be a difference, given how new television was as a medium. It was reported in a publication of Broadcasting on the 7th of November 1960. These findings were from the telephone pollsters Sindler and Company. It's probably the most important statistical source of the belief. In this article, they claimed that 48.7% of the radio audience named Mr. Nixon and only 21% picked Mr. Kennedy. Of the television audience, 30.2% named Mr. Kennedy and 28.6% picked Mr. Nixon. Additionally, in the Atlanta Constitution, the McGill report claimed that radio listeners recorded Nixon as the winner, but television viewers recorded Kennedy as the winner. Other than that, there wasn't any polling specifically looking at the radio versus the television audience. Furthermore, the McGill report did not include any sample size. Sindler and Company didn't provide any polling data on the perceptions of the radio audience alone. There were two experiments that tried to recreate the original debate audience's experience. One was in 1990 by Vansel and Pendle, and the other was by James Druckmann in 2003. These have been criticized for various reasons, mainly because they occurred many decades after the original debate. That it would be extremely difficult to find participants who wouldn't already have biases towards the candidates. And additionally, because these mainly relied on American university students rather than a much wider audience, which would have been truer to the original audience from 1960. This myth has come about not really from any data, but more from the boost that Kennedy got after the first debate, and especially Kennedy and Nixon's reactions to it. Overall, although there aren't the numbers from the time, each generation that goes back to these debates and either listens to them or watches them themselves come away with the same PR conclusions. Generally, people can hear Nixon's voice. They can hear that he was a good debater, but they can also see his awkwardness in that first debate, especially compared to the subsequent debates that most people don't usually watch. And so, although this myth isn't grounded in numbers, it is fairly clear to see. Additionally, television was a new medium, and so, on average, people in more rural areas and people in areas and counties that were more predisposed to Nixon's campaign than Kennedy's campaign would have been areas more likely to have listened on the radio than tuned into television. The thing is, Nixon refused to have makeup for the debate. Although Nixon had been taking medicine for his injured knee, his mother called him immediately after the debate because she was worried that he looked unwell. Maybe the quote that takes the prize was from Chicago's Mayor Daley, who said in an interview, quote, "My God, they've embalmed him before he even died." The fact is, Nixon was a good speaker. He had the kind of voice that's more theatrical and more authoritative compared to Kennedy's. He had the kind of voice that many people might consider more suited to a fireside chat or more grandfatherly. Certainly more of a politician's voice than Kennedy's. So although it might be surprising that there actually isn't the data there from the 1960 audience to truly back up statistically whether Nixon was considered to have put in a stronger performance by the radio audience. Nevertheless, the evidence is there in the images we can see now, in people's reactions and statements over time. The focus that so many contemporary reports put on Nixon's appearance kind of underlies that his performance on the radio must have been deemed stronger by many people. because most of the criticisms were visual rather than auditory. So even if there isn't the statistical evidence from polling to really back up that claim that the radio audience preferred Nixon's performance compared to the television audience, it can be inferred in all of the statements praising Kennedy's televised performance, surprising many people. The criticism given to the image that Nixon portrayed, but additionally from Kennedy and Nixon's statements themselves. Fundamentally, this fact that Kennedy performed better on television and Nixon performed better on radio is proven true each time someone sees a presidential debate, because fundamentally it's a reflection of people's understanding of how important the imagery is. In addition to the content of someone's arguments, their verbal abilities, and the tones and smoothness of their voice.